Heimir, the son of Studas, had been in deserted forests a long time, and had often ridden into populated areas and done damage in Zivka's country, burning his farms and killing his men. And he was doing this day and night. 20 years passed in this fashion, all the time that King Thidrekssaga was out of his kingdom. And when Heimir found out that Zivka has been killed, he realized how much evil he had done and wished to repent his sins. He rode to a monastery with all of his weapons and with his horse Rispa. When he rode into the monastery courtyard, the monks asked who this man was. He sprang from his horse and bade them call the abbot. The monks told the abbot that a man in good armor had come and wished to meet him, and they thought that he was a distinguished man. The abbot went to meet the man and asked who he was. He answered, "My name is Lodwig, and I come from Amlungland. You will hear why I have come here." He took the shield from his neck, and then he took off the sword Nagelring, and the birnie, and the helmet and the mailhose. He laid all these weapons before the feet of the abbot, and then he laid himself down and spoke. "Sir, these weapons and this horse, and myself and my clothes, and all the money I have, which is not less than 10 pounds, I will give for God's use in this place, and I give myself into your rule to pay for my sins." All the monks said that God had certainly put this intention into his head, since he had been a warrior or the vassal of a king. They could tell from his weapons that he had been some kind of nobleman. The monks also thought it worth a lot that he had brought so much money to them, and they spoke to the abbot. "Take this man up, who is laying here. He will be a great enhancement to our monastery." But the abbot stood silently and thought about this man, and was amazed because he thought this man to be very strong, and he thought to himself that this man would not be obedient if he were in the monastery, and so he was afraid to take him in. All the monks pleaded vehemently that he be taken in. The abbot thought the money good, and took Lodwig by the hand, and led him into the church, and into the choir, and led him into a room, and told him which bench he would sit on. In front of the room, he laid down his fine clothes, and took the black cloak like all the other monks. The same day, he was consecrated as a monk. The abbot took now all his money and his armor and made it his own, but Lodwig kept the rule. If the brothers had known that he was Heimir Studas' son, they would never have taken him, no matter how much gold and silver he had. but he served in the monastery for a while. The giant Aspilian had many farms in this land of Lungbardi. He was as large and strong, and had as bad a disposition as ever. He had wrongly taken possession of many things, gold and silver and good treasure, because there were few men who dared keep anything he wanted. The monks had a large and rich farm. Aspilian took possession of it, and this seemed very bad to the abbot, that they should lose their farm. The abbot sent some monks to meet the giant. They asked how it happened that Aspilian took their farm, and the giant answered that he had taken their farm since it was more fitting for him to own the farm than for them. But the monks said that the farm had been given to them for God's sake. The giant answered, "I shall end this case with you. We shall decide by ordeal who shall have the farm. You will choose one man who is bold enough to fight with me. And if I am defeated, then you will own the farm and many others. But if I win, then God will have shown that he wills that I have the farm." And that was the law of the land. If two men have a conflict over one thing, then they shall fight a duel. The monks could answer nothing, because the giant had followed the law with them. They went home and told the abbot how the giant had answered them. The abbot complained of this before all the monks in the chapter, and said that they would have to lose their farm if they did not find a man who dared fight against the giant. And the monks were very displeased at this, and sent men far and wide to see if any man would test his strength and fight with the giant. But they found no one. One time, they were complaining and grieving about this case in the chapter. Lodvig spoke. "Why are you complaining, monks? What is Aspilian doing to you?" And the abbot answered, "Aspilian has taken away our farm and offered us a duel in return if we lay claim to it. No one wishes to fight with the giant, but we promise, with God's help, the forgiveness of all sins that have been confessed to the person who does this." Lodvig replied, "I gave my money and my weapons and myself to this monastery for God's sake. Now I shall also go to fight with the giant. Where are my sword and my armor?" The abbot began to suspect that he might be some kind of warrior and said, "You cannot have your sword. It has been broken up and made into door hinges here in the monastery, and the rest of the armor has been sold at the market for money." Lodvig said, You monks are wise in books, but ignorant in knighthood. If you had known how good those weapons were, you would never have parted with them." He sprang up at the abbot and took his hood in both hands and spoke. "You were certainly foolish if you had no other iron to make your door hinges than my good sword Nagelring. You will pay for that." He shook the cowl and his head so hard that 4 teeth sprang out. When the monks heard Nagelring named, they realized that it was Heimir Studa's son who had come there, and they became very frightened, and they took the keys that went to a large chest. There were all his weapons. One took his sword Nagelring, another the birnie and mailhose, and the third the helmet. The fourth carried the shield, and the fifth the spear. And these weapons had all been kept so well that they were no worse now than when they had been left. Heimir took Nagelring and saw how beautifully the blade and the gold shone, and he remembered how much protection he had had under its cutting edge, and he turned alternately red and pale, and was silent for a while. After that, he asked where his horse Rispa was, and the abbot answered, "Your horse has been pulling stone to the church, and has now been dead for many years." The monks said, "We shall send throughout all of this kingdom, and look for the best horse that can be gotten. There are many good horses in the monastery, and you will have the best of them." Heimir seems to have reclaimed the fire in his heart, and he is standing there with all his weapons and armor, ready to fight the giant Aspilian over a disputed farm. So let's see how this duel, this Holmgang, has turned out in the past, by returning here to the Hall of Sagenheim for the next episode of the Thidrekssaga. Thank you very much.